Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that your entire life has changed overnight. You went to bed as a regular person, living your normal life, and then you wake up married to a billionaire. For Emma, it wasn't just a dream. It was a new reality. Emma had never imagined herself living in a world of private jets, luxury mansions, and diamond necklaces. She was just a simple woman with a quiet job, someone who cherished her independence and the little things in life. But all of that changed the day she met Alexander Stone, a billionaire businessman who could make anything and anyone his. With his striking looks and unmatched wealth, he seemed like the perfect catch to the outside world. But for Emma, that wasn't the full story. Emma's whirlwind romance with Alexander took everyone by surprise, including herself. She had barely known him before he swept her off her feet and into a world of glitz and glamour. It all felt like something out of a fairy tale. Lavish dinners, designer clothes, and exotic vacations. But there was something beneath the surface that Emma couldn't quite put her finger on. Alexander had a way of making everything feel too good to be true, and soon she would learn why. Their marriage was sudden. One day they were just dating, and the next, Emma found herself signing papers that tied her to Alexander for life. Everyone told her she was the luckiest woman alive. After all, who wouldn't want to be married to a man like Alexander? But deep down, Emma felt something was off. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had become more of a possession than a partner. The days passed. Emma began to see cracks in the perfect life she had been handed. Alexander was controlling, his every move calculated, his every decision final. He was always one step ahead, always knowing what Emma was doing, who she was talking to, and where she was going. It was as if she had stepped into a gilded cage, beautiful on the outside, but suffocating on the inside. Despite the wealth and luxury that surrounded her, Emma started to feel trapped. The people she once called friends became distant, either envious of her new life or too intimidated to reach out. Alexander's business world, full of powerful men and women who seemed just as calculating as he was, made her feel even more isolated. And worst of all, Emma found herself questioning if she had ever truly known the man she married. Alexander wasn't just a billionaire, he was a man with secrets, and Emma was beginning to uncover them. Late-night phone calls, whispered conversations, and unexplained absences. Alexander's life was far more complicated than she had realized. And now, she was a part of it, whether she wanted to be or not. Emma tried to hold on to some semblance of normalcy. She continued with her hobbies, tried to connect with her family, and even considered going back to work. But every time she thought she had a chance to reclaim her old life, Alexander would remind her just how powerless she was. He wasn't violent, at least not in the traditional sense, but his control was suffocating. He dictated what she wore, who she saw, and even what she could say in public. Emma had gone from being an independent woman to a trophy wife, with no say in her own life. And yet, no one knew what was really happening behind the walls of their grand mansion. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple. Alexander was the charming billionaire, and Emma was his elegant, doting wife. Together, they attended charity galas, appeared on magazine covers, and smiled for the cameras. But behind those smiles, Emma was desperately trying to find a way out. One night, after a particularly tense argument, Emma finally confronted Alexander. She demanded to know why he was so controlling, why he wouldn't let her live her own life. Alexander's response was chilling. He leaned in close and said, "You'll never leave me, Emma. I made sure of that the day we got married." Those words sent a shiver down her spine. What did he mean? How could he have made sure she couldn't leave? Emma didn't understand. But she knew one thing. She was no longer in control of her own destiny. She had married a man who saw her as something he could own, and now she had to find a way to escape. But escape wouldn't be easy. Alexander had power, influence, and resources far beyond anything Emma could imagine. She couldn't just walk away from this marriage. There would be consequences. And yet, she couldn't continue living like this, trapped in a life that wasn't hers. As Emma stared out at the sprawling estate that was now her home, she knew she had a choice to make. Would she stay in this marriage, playing the role of the billionaire's wife? Or would she risk everything to break free? The answer wasn't clear yet, but one thing was certain. Emma's life would never be the same again. And this was only the beginning. Emma had always been a person who valued her freedom. Growing up in a modest family, she had worked hard to build her own life. She never relied on anyone for help, always believing that independence was her greatest asset. She had dreams, simple ones, maybe starting her own small business, living a life where she could be in control. But now, all of that seemed like a distant memory. Her marriage to Alexander wasn't something she had planned. In fact, she barely understood how it all happened so quickly. One moment, she was dating a man who seemed larger than life, and the next, she was thrust into a world she didn't belong to. The wedding itself had been rushed. It was supposed to be a small, intimate ceremony, but Alexander turned it into a spectacle. Everything was about appearances. It was as if her own desires and needs had disappeared, replaced by the image of the perfect wife Alexander wanted her to be. The media was obsessed with them. Everywhere Emma went, cameras followed. Headlines were plastered with her face, calling her the billionaire's stunning new bride. She felt like an accessory, not a person. The attention was overwhelming, but she kept quiet, trying to convince herself that this was just an adjustment period. Maybe things would calm down. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Emma started to realize that her life wasn't going to get better. It was only going to get more suffocating. Alexander controlled everything. At first, it was small things, insisting she wear certain clothes or attend specific events. But soon, it became more intense. He monitored her phone calls, dictated who she could speak to, and even controlled her finances. Every decision, no matter how small, had to go through him. Emma tried to talk to him, tried to make him understand that she needed her space, her independence, but Alexander always brushed it off, his charming smile masking the cold reality beneath. "I'm just protecting you, Emma," he would say. "This world is dangerous, and I'm the only one who can keep you safe." But Emma knew better. This wasn't about protection. It was about control. Her family had tried to reach out, worried about her sudden change in lifestyle. But Alexander made it nearly impossible for her to connect with them. He had made sure that Emma was entirely dependent on him, cutting her off from the people who had once been her support system. And so, Emma found herself alone in a mansion full of luxury, but utterly devoid of warmth. The more she learned about Alexander, the more unsettling things became. His business empire was vast, but it was shrouded in secrecy. There were rumors, whispers of shady deals, partnerships with dangerous people, and a dark past that he had worked hard to bury. Emma had stumbled upon some of his secrets by accident. Locked documents, suspicious phone calls late at night, but every time she tried to confront him, Alexander would quickly change the subject, or make her feel guilty for questioning him. It was a delicate balance. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and Emma was just another piece in his carefully crafted puzzle. But Emma wasn't the only one caught in Alexander's web. She began to notice other people in his life who seemed to be trapped by His influence. Business associates who seemed terrified of crossing him. Employees who whispered behind closed doors. And even women from his past who had simply disappeared without a trace. The more she looked, the more Emma realized that she wasn't just a trophy wife. She was part of something much bigger and much darker than she had ever imagined. One night, after a particularly cold exchange, Emma found herself sitting in the garden, staring up at the stars. She had never felt so alone. She thought about running away, escaping this life, and starting over somewhere far away. But she knew it wasn't that simple. Alexander had too much power, too many connections. Even if she did manage to leave, he would find her, and then what? What would happen if she tried to break free? The thought terrified her. Her life had become a series of lies, pretending to be happy for the cameras, smiling at events, and playing the role of the perfect wife. But inside, Emma was falling apart. She missed the person she used to be, the woman who could make her own choices. Now, every decision felt like a trap, every move monitored. The breaking point came when Emma discovered something she wasn't supposed to see. It was a file, hidden deep in Alexander's study, locked away in a drawer she had never been allowed to open. Inside were documents, proof of illegal deals, bribes, and even threats made to people who had crossed him. Alexander wasn't just a controlling husband. He was a dangerous man, and Emma was in the middle of it all. As she stood there, holding the file in her hands, her heart raced. This was her way out. She had evidence, proof that could take him down. But it wouldn't be easy. Alexander was ruthless. And if he found out that she had seen this, there would be consequences. Emma had a choice. She could keep pretending, playing the role Alexander had forced her into. Or she could take a stand, risk everything, and fight for her freedom. But she knew that once she made her move, there would be no turning back. The stakes were higher than ever, and the danger was real. The mansion seemed colder that night, the walls closing in around her. Emma took a deep breath, her hands shaking, as she hid the file away. She wasn't ready to make her move just yet, but the wheels were in motion. She knew that soon, everything would come to a head. And when it did, there would be no going back. Emma's mind raced as she stashed the incriminating documents away. Every part of her body was telling her to run, to leave the mansion, and never look back. But she knew she had to be smart. Alexander wasn't someone who would let her walk away easily. His reach was long, and his influence even longer. One wrong move, and her entire world could collapse. For the next few days, she acted normal, careful not to give anything away. She smiled through dinners, nodded along during meetings, and played the perfect role in front of the media. But inside, she was planning, waiting for the right moment to make her move. She had to be sure, to have everything ready before she confronted him. One mistake, and it would all be over. Late one night, when Alexander was out for a business dinner, Emma found her chance. She retrieved the documents and began making copies, determined to protect herself. She knew she couldn't go to the police just yet, not without concrete proof of Alexander's crimes and a safe way to escape his grasp. But as she worked, a creeping feeling of dread took over her. She wasn't sure if she could trust anyone. In Alexander's world, they were all too close to him, too tied to his power. But just as she finished copying the last page, Emma heard the front door creak open. Her heart dropped. Alexander wasn't supposed to be home yet. She quickly shoved the documents back into their hiding place, barely managing to calm her shaking hands. Footsteps echoed down the hall, growing closer and closer. Emma! Alexander's voice was calm, but she could hear the tension beneath it. Are you still up? Yes, I'm just going through some emails, she said, forcing a smile as he entered the room. She felt the weight of his eyes on her, like he was searching for something in her expression. For a moment, she thought he knew. She thought he had figured it out. But then, just as quickly, he smiled. That same charming smile that had once made her feel safe, but now only filled her with dread. "You work too hard," he said, walking over and gently brushing her hair from her face. "Get some rest." Emma nodded, her heart still racing, as she watched him leave the room. The tension was suffocating. She knew she couldn't keep this up much longer. The next morning, Emma received a call from an unexpected source. One of Alexander's former business partners, someone she had met briefly at a party months ago. He sounded nervous, almost desperate, and warned her to be careful. "You're in danger, Emma," he said. "I know what you found. I've been there before. But you need to be smart. Alexander isn't just going to let you go. He never does." That was the final push she needed. Emma realized that the only way out was to confront Alexander head-on. But she had to do it on her terms. She needed to catch him off guard, make sure he couldn't twist the situation in his favor. And so, she arranged a meeting with him in his private office. When the moment finally came, Emma stood in front of him, her hands shaking slightly, but her resolve was strong. She held the copies of the documents in her hand, her eyes meeting his. Alexander raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the seriousness in her demeanor. "What's this?" he asked, his voice calm, but there was an edge to it. "A warning. I know. Everything, Alexander," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her. "The deals, the bribes, the people you've hurt. I have proof, and I'm not going to live like this anymore." For a moment, there was silence. The air between them crackled with tension. Alexander's expression darkened as he realized the gravity of what Emma was saying. His calm demeanor fell away, replaced by a cold fury. "You think you can threaten me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can just walk away from this marriage, from everything I've built." Emma held her ground. "I don't want anything from you. I just want my freedom." Alexander's eyes narrowed, and for a second, Emma thought he might lash out. But then, something shifted in him. He leaned back, a cold smile spreading across his face. "You've always been more trouble than you're worth," he said quietly. "But I'll give you credit. You've got guts." Emma didn't waver. She knew he was dangerous, but she also knew that she held the cards now. "If anything happens to me," she said, her voice firm, "copies of these documents will go straight to the authorities. You can't control me anymore, Alexander." For the first time, she saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He realized she wasn't bluffing, and in that moment, Emma knew she had won. She had broken free from his grasp, something she had once thought impossible. Days later, Emma was packing her things, ready to leave the mansion for good. The divorce papers had been signed, and Alexander had agreed to her terms. It wasn't a clean break. Nothing about this situation was, but it was a start. She could finally breathe again. As she walked out of the grand doors of the mansion for the last time, Emma felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had escaped a life of control and manipulation, and now, for the first time in a long while, she had her freedom back. She wasn't just the billionaire's wife anymore. She was Emma, strong, independent, and ready to reclaim her life. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Emma had learned something invaluable through this ordeal. No amount of wealth or power could truly hold her down if she believed in herself and fought for her own happiness. And that, she realized, was worth more than anything Alexander's money could ever buy.